Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well, and thank you for joining me today, right on this Monday morning. We're going to be talking about ChatGPT and really how to use it, how to develop it in terms of being a leader. What would be helpful for me, if anybody is on here, I'd love to hear how you're using it now, if you're using it. So if you wouldn't in the chat, just as we're sort of getting ready to start, if you just say that you are using it, or what actually platform you might be using as well, would be interesting. So, and what we'll do is we'll go through a few slides, just sort of some background in regards to ChatGPT. But then what I will be doing also is I'll switch over and do a live demonstration of this in terms of some of the ways that I've used this, and hopefully those will be helpful for those that that are on the webinar. So this is a quote that I've used for probably a decade anyway, by a gentleman, Eric Hoffer. It says, "In times of change, the learners will inherit the earth, while the learned will find themselves perfectly suited for a world that no longer exists." And I think it feels like every year that I use this quote in some way, it just continues to be relevant in terms of what we're doing. So again, I think this is a perfect example. There are a lot of people that I've found that are resistant to using ChatGPT for one reason or another. And I will quote, I remember hearing Gary Vaynerchuk say that technology doesn't care what you think about it. It's coming. So to me, I look at this and saying, if it is here, the best thing I can do is understand how it. And I will tell you, I've been using it for just about a year now. And it has been incredible in terms of the impact that it's had for me, my business, working with my clients. It has really just elevated my ability to be able to be much more efficient and effective for them and for myself as well. So what are the objectives, right? We're going to talk about some different platforms. There are a number of different platforms out there. We'll talk about the generative prompt, what that is and why it's so powerful. To me, that's really everything here. Then we'll talk about some of the prompts that we can use and how we can elevate those. I'll tell you how I'm using it. I'll give you some examples, and then again, we'll do sort of that live version. So we'll take about 15 minutes to go through some of these slides. A little bit background on myself in terms of who I am. I have a podcast that I've run since 2018 called Learning from Leaders. I have a company that I first started in 2008, and I launched a book called The Leadership Bridge back in June of 2022. And these are some of the companies that either I've worked with in the past or am currently working with. And certainly the current clients that I have, I am finding many more ways to insert chat into the work that we do that helps them to be more effective in terms of the work that we're doing, either individually as teams. So AI platforms, I just chose 4 here. If you were to Google this, not using chat, if you were to actually Google, there are numbers of them. I think I saw that there was a listing of 10 different AI platforms. So I've only listed 4. Chat is the one that I use the most. I've found it to be the most user-friendly in ways. I've also used Claude as well, and I have subscriptions to both ChatGPT and to Claude. Again, I use both of them. I have played around with Bing. I wasn't really a fan of Bing. It's been a while. It could have changed since then, but it just didn't have the same feel for me in terms of how I like to utilize it. So I don't use that. And I have not really had an opportunity to jump on and use Bard all that often. So Chat, Claude are the 2s that I use the most. And Claude I was using as well for larger documents, things that had many more characters, specifically for if I was wanting to review a study that was done and I wanted to ask Chat or Claude questions on it, or ask Chat. Sometimes it was too big. It wouldn't be able to take all that information, whereas Claude has a much larger again, ability to add documents. As an example, I was able to upload my entire book, which is about 124 pages or 134 pages, as a PDF document into Claude. And it was able to basically read the entire document, whereas I couldn't do that with Chat. And what I did with that was I actually had Claude, with the help of Chat later on as I refined it, create my book, The Leadership Bridge, into an executive summary that I now sort of give as a lead magnet. So generative prompts, right? The power is in the question, right? There are three prompt patterns that I'll talk about. One is called persona, one is called audience, and the other is I call it interview, and I'll talk about how I use those. Um, so to me, the key to this is refining your question. How do you refine your question? I look at Chat or Claude or any of these as they're almost like, for those of you that might have been familiar with the crazy eight ball, that you shook it, threw it up in the air, and it came back. And this to me is the same thing, but also along those lines is that you get real answers with this. And also, the better you are at asking the question, the better the information you get back. I think of it as garbage in, garbage out. If I don't ask a good question, then I probably I won't leverage this tool as effectively as I could. So here is one prompt that you can add right when you start Chat, and I'll give you an example of how I used it when we actually go to the live demo of this, is that you could actually ask this or prompt it to say, from now on, when I ask a question, suggest a better version on the question and ask if I want to use it instead. So to me, this gives you an opportunity to start understanding, like, what are powerful questions? How do I ask these things? And you've actually asked Chat or Claude or Bard or Bing or whichever one you use along these same lines. Like, help me to get better at asking questions. What's more effective? So if you can, I would remember that prompt, especially as you're starting to do work in this area in terms of how do you utilize it. This to me is a great prompt to be able to help you refine those questions. So here's a persona prompt, right? And I use this quite often, where I will say act as, and that's the key to this, right? It's really the act as part, at least as I use it for a persona prompt. And what I'm asking it to do is act as an expert trained in the Cotter 8 model, and I'll talk about that in the live version. Act as an expert editor, act as an expert copywriter, act as an expert in motivational interviewing. I'll talk about how I use that. Act as an employee in this particular field or within this industry. I can use it for that. What are some of the interests or things that might be of value? So a number of different ways, but the key to that is act as, and whatever that is. And again, I'll talk about how that can be valuable. So the next one we talk about is an audience persona, right? So assume I have no knowledge in this area and explain to me in a way that does not overwhelm me. So whatever the topic is, I could ask it to assume I've got no knowledge, or assume the group that I'm dealing with has no knowledge in this area, the audience that I'm working with. What are some ways that I could present the information that I know that will be easy for them to understand? Believe it or not, I use this as well when I'm reading studies or articles that might have some areas that I find a little more complex to read. I might ask it, I might cut and paste that piece and ask it to explain it to me in a fifth grader model. And it provides me some context in terms of what the article is about. And then I can go back and read it again and almost get a feeling for, based on the description, what is actually being said in the article. So the last one is an interview persona. And I think this one is really valuable too, right? So this would be a prompt. I would say you are working with a manager to help them effectively deal with an employee who is having performance issues. Here's the act as. This is almost like a double persona, right? Act as an expert in motivational interviewing. We're going to talk about what that is, right? Ask them questions one at a time to understand the specific issues they are having with their employee, right? Ask as many questions, or you could say ask 10 questions to create an outline the manager can follow to help their employee and provide that outline, right? So what I've done is I've asked Chat to act as this person, an expert in motivational interviewing. And then what I'm asking it to do next is to say, ask me about my employee, right? This is the problem that I'm having. Ask me about this employee based on what you know about motivational interviewing and how it can help me. And ask enough questions so that you understand my employee, the situation that I'm dealing with, and then create an outline for me in terms of a strategy that I can use, how I'm going to be effective at this. And to me, it's such a powerful way we can do this. And there are so many different ways I could, if I wanted to get healthier, I could ask chat to act as um, a personal trainer, um, and or a dietitian, and I want to get healthier. Ask me, interview me as though I were your client in terms of how you would do that. And what we'll do is start asking your age and different components, financial planning, whatever your thing is. You could do that with this one. So the interview persona. So remember that. Right. So, what are some other suggestions, some other ways that you might use it? Well, you could create motivational content, right? What is an inspiring case study I could share about a company culture that fosters innovation, right? If I do lunch and learns, what are some forward thinking topics to cover in employee skill building workshops? Writing, right? Can you review this draft announcement that I'm going to send out? Um, and can you give me feedback on it? I was working with an individual director who had to send out an email about a change that was going to be made. And there's a social needs model that I used, and what I asked him to do was cut and paste his memo that he was going to send out to this group, and then ask chat to basically evaluate it based on the social needs that we talk about that are important to employees. And what it did was it broke it out to say, here might be some of the issues in terms of the way this is written that you may want to change this up. Right. So that was really important for them in terms of being able to understand, like, how do I use this? Right. Providing data insights, review this article or study, make suggestions on how I can leverage it in my team or business or industry. I do this quite a bit. Having come from the biotech industry many years ago, it was all around research. So I still continue to do, I'm always looking for studies in a lot of different areas, whether it's team building, personal development, motivation, mindset, leadership skills, whatever that might be. In those studies, what I'm doing is I'm asking it based on the outcomes of the study, or what's the strength of the study, the methods, act as an expert researcher for a peer reviewed journal. How would you rate this study in terms of its validity? So a lot of different ways, right? Brainstorm about team building exercises. A lot of different ways we can use this. So how have I used it? Well, I've used it to create case studies, workshop outlines, quizzes. I use it for social media. I've used it for what ifs, right? Um, Additional validation on the model. So there are these 5 models that I use pretty regularly in the work that I do, and they're all based around either influence or well-being or goal setting, understanding social needs, or the umbrella for me is around cables. This model that I developed around research behaviors for developing engagement and inspiring teams. So what I continue to do is when I'm working with these, if there are challenges that have come up, I will ask it, how does this model address this problem? Or how, based on this recent study, does what I've created address the challenge that this study brings up? So going all on those lines, right? Cross-referencing, right? How does the cables model address each of the questions in Gallup's Q12 and provide examples, right? As I mentioned, I used it to create an executive book summary. I use it as a coaching assistant. There are multiple plugins that when you utilize ChatGPT, which is the one that I use most often, that allow me to do different things with my business. And there are lots of them, right? And again, there's so many more, and it continues to grow. If there's one thing I go back to this, leaders or learners, is that I'm taking classes now in regards to generative platforms and questioning and understanding as much as I can, because it changes all the time. And there are so many free resources that you can do online in terms of continue to access information. All right, so let's jump over actually to give ChatGPT a try. And what I did was I set up a couple examples already because I wanted to save us some time. But what I'll do is I'll add on to the end of these in terms of what I've done. So give me just a moment here, and we'll switch this over. I'm going to disappear here as well, just so that we have full access to the screen. Bear with me. All right, so let's see. Hopefully you can Give me a second here. So you can see this is my ChatGPT screen up here. And what I've done is if you look down the left, this is my history. Either today, yesterday, things that I've done. You can see really, you get an insight in terms of what I've played around with. And the benefit of this is that you have access to this all the time, right? This is always, you get a running. So if I wanted to go back to something that I had sort of been asking questions on or an area that I was focused on, I can go back to that again and sort of jump in, and we're going to do that now in terms of one of the things that I talked about was cables, right? This is a model that I use. So what I've done is I've asked it to bring up cables again. So this was earlier. What I did was I said, can you provide recent research on Patrick Verno's cables model? Um, and what it does first is it searches the web on this for me. So this is the paid version, allows it to scrape the internet. So that's what it's doing. So what it has done is it's pulled my model off of the internet, as well as this online course that I run with many of my clients. So what I asked it to do next was, well, what does the Gallup organization use to measure employee engagement? Because I know that that's an important one. So what I did was when I asked it that question, it comes up with the Gallup organization, right? What their tool is in terms of Q12. So it goes through, gives me an example of Q12. It gives me links so I could go and actually look at the survey, what the questions are, or I could ask it here. So what I did next was I said, well, would the cables model be an effective approach to improving engagement based on the Q12s? So what I'm now doing is I'm cross-referencing. I'm asking it to give me an idea of would this be valuable? So as you can see, what it does is it takes each of the letters from the model that I created in cables and says, okay, congruence. It aligns with Q12 focus on clear expectations and integrity and leadership. So it starts to put this together. Now I could go deeper on this in terms of asking it more sort of focused questions on this. I could ask it to, right? So here I said, can you provide suggested strategies to improve listening? So now what it's doing is it's simply going to start looking out there and saying, what are some of the things that we could do to improve listening if that was one of the areas, right? So active listening, right? Tells me how what we could do in that. And believe it or not, this is a little slow, the way it's sort of pumping this out. Usually it's faster. What's probably happening is there are a lot of people that are on here right now. So what it's doing is it's providing me an opportunity to look and figure out in this specific area, how do I improve in that area? So what I could do if, say, I write articles or anything that I send out there, and I'm like, well, I want this to help me, but I want it to be in my style. What I could do, you'll see I come over to expert style. I'll go up to the top. As I mentioned, I prompted this. And let's jump in right here. What I did was I took an article that I had previously written, and I've asked it to analyze, act as an expert in writing, in analysis, and create an outline of what my writing style is. So this is what it does, right? Your writing style that you provided is authoritative, it's informative. Here are some of the things that it has identified in terms of my writing style, right? So then I asked it, how would you suggest describing these if I wanted to write future articles in this style? And now it gives me, the opportunity to say, these are some of the things that I want to make sure if I want an article that's based on this, this is how I do it. Now, here's what I did as well, as I said, okay, well, based on this, can you write a 500-word memo that will go out to my employees? And I could make it 200, I could make it 1,000. I could ask it to have bullet points. And then I would say, on the importance of completing performance reviews. So here it is, right? To all team members, right? Embracing performance reviews, and it goes through and it writes it in my style, gives bullet points, and it ends here. Now, a couple things I could do here. This would allow me, if I didn't like this version, I could hit that again. So now what it's going to do is it's going to print, it's now going to generate another version of this. because I sort of said, yeah, maybe that's okay. I don't like it. I'm going to give it the opportunity to give me a complete new version of this, is what it's doing. So here you go. So this is a complete new version of this request that I made of it. I could do this in a number of different ways. I could ask it to make it humorous, and it could do the same thing, right? Can you provide, and believe it or not, spelling doesn't matter with this. Thank you, ChatGPT. Right? Can you provide a humorous version? Now, it won't go until this is done, but you'll see here in just a second. Right? So all it's doing is going through and give me another version and saying, what do you think of this? Does this one sound better? And then I have the opportunity at the end to say, yes, this looks pretty good, or I change it around, right? Was this response better or worse? So let's see what happens on the humorous version. So again, now it's sort of figuring this thing out and saying, okay, let me figure out if we can do this. Dear cast members, right? Cue the spotlights, right? Now I know you're thinking, right? So all this does is take another version of this, right? In maybe a different style. You say, look, I want to play around with this. So it has the opportunity to do that. Next, I wanted to talk about motivational interviewing, how I use this. To me, this is a really valuable one. See, so something obviously happened here. It got kicked out, so it's asking me, do I want to regenerate this? What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the prompt that I did earlier on motivational interviewing. This is probably one of the most valuable coaching tools I think you can use as a leader, as a manager, in terms of coaching for performance. A lot of validation, but what I asked it is, what is motivational interviewing? So, right, so it tells me what it is, who it was developed by, what are the key features to it, right? Collaboration, evocation, autonomy, compassion, use of specific techniques. Now, this is speaking about it based on its use in a healthcare model. So what I then asked it was, well, is this an effective approach to use in a work setting with employee performance issues? And then what does it do? Yes, motivational interviewing can be an effective approach in a work setting, particularly for addressing employee performance issues. And it goes through and tells me how to do that, why this is important, right? So now what I've done is I said, okay, well, I have an employee who their work quality has been poor recently, leading to many errors and the need for rework. Can you provide a detailed outline on how I could use this approach with this employee, right? So now I'm starting to get more specific in terms of how I'm going to use it with this employee, right? So now it's telling me, okay, here's what you would do, right? Pre-session, opening the conversation, right? Exploring the issue, right? Open-ended questions, reflective listening, addressing the core issues, fostering commitment and change, right? Closing the conversation. After, what am I going to do? So if I go back up, we talk about discrepancy in here, developing discrepancy or trying to create this sense of discrepancy, which is really all about a gap between where they are and where that I want them to be. I could ask it for more detail on this, right? So right here, developing discrepancy. So what I've done at the end is I've said, what are 5 suggested questions I might use to develop discrepancy? So what it does is it provides some examples on how I can do that. What I could then ask it to do is I could ask it to take any one of these sections and go deeper into it. Or if you remember that interview persona, I could ask it to act as an expert in motivational interviewing who is helping me as a manager deal with this employee and ask me as many questions as you need to be able to understand this employee so that you can create a framework that I can use with this employee. And it will do that, right? So you could actually then say, what if my employee were to say this or this to happen? How would I overcome that? Okay, so that's motivational interviewing. What I want to talk about next is this model that I use called the Cotter 8. This was developed by a gentleman named John Cotter. I believe he was out of Harvard. From a performance or a project management model, I think it's one of the best out there. So what I've done is I've asked it, well, first off, what is the Cotter 8 model? And it goes through and talks about the model, how it was developed, um, why it's, what its steps are, how they're valuable, right? So it goes through, right? Create urgency, form a powerful coalition, create a vision for change. These are the things that you need to do with this Cotter 8 model. So then I might say, okay, well, we're implementing a new medical record system in our hospital. Can you act as an expert trained in the Cotter 8 model and provide an outline we may want to follow based on the Cotter 8? So now what it does is, again, it's got a little more detail. So it's now going to go through and actually give me recommendations based on what I've asked it to do, right? For each of these sections, how could I do this, right? What do I do here? Now again, I could ask it for any one of these sections, to be more specific, or could you provide examples? So if I said, you know, could you provide more detailed examples on how to create a vision for change? And I'm not going to fix that typo because it will know what I'm saying there. All right. So now what it's doing is it's simply going just off of that section. Okay. Let's look at this a little more. What are some things that you could do? Um, how can we develop in this area? And it's giving me more suggestions. So again, I could do this. I could ask it to interview me. Number of different ways I could do that. So an important one for you to, I think, put in your toolbox. So another one that I could ask it to give me some help with is around employees, right? So I could, as I started up here, I asked it to, right, based on your most current research and surveys, what are the 5 greatest leadership challenges leaders are facing and the 5 greatest challenges employees are facing? Now, what's interesting, when I asked it this, it only answered the first part. So there are times where you can give it too much information. If you're asking for too many different things, you might have to break it down into different sections, which is what I did here. I broke it down into, right, it gave me the answers for this. So what I asked it next was, well, what are the 5 greatest challenges employees are facing, right? So what does it do? It gives me these, right? But then I asked it again. So what about specific challenges with those they report to, right? So what are some of the challenges that they're facing with their leaders, right? Communication barriers, performance management, lack of trust, isolation, work-life balance, right? So this, I could then ask, right? So now I've asked it, can you provide some suggestions now? So again, what is it doing? It's going out there and looking for, I could say, best practices. I could say, based on certain models, how would you use this? I can do this for, if there are certain models that I use around goal setting, right? For SMART or set goals that I use, or different models that are out there, right? The one thing, or traction, or the 4 disciplines of execution. I could ask it, based on what I'm trying to do, how would this align with the 4 disciplines of execution? So I'll ask it to regenerate, and let's see what happens. Right. So I think we just have a lot of people that are probably on right now. So sometimes it'll kick you off. Less so in the paid version, which I think is about $20 a month for me to have access to this. Right. So now it's just giving me suggestions. I could ask it to put together a 30-minute workshop for me. So I'll ask it, could you create a 30-minute workshop? Wait for it to finish up here. Right. So it's giving me all of these different things that I could possibly do, right? So now, right, could you create a 30-minute workshop? So here it goes. Just going to do the whole thing. Objectives are recommended. There's another piece of this that I could actually ask it to create a PowerPoint presentation, and I could structure it in a way that I could actually cut and paste this because it would put it in code, and I could insert it into PowerPoint, and it would set the structure for that PowerPoint, and then I could go in and sort of tweak it around, but it would do that. And I'm looking at these type of workshops that I'm doing around chat as as being a series. So this will not be the only one. I wanted to simply create some buzz around some of the things that I think are most valuable and on a higher level. So the last one that after this is finished that I'll talk about is I want to go back to that refining questions. How do we do that, or why that can be valuable? Right. So tips for success. What are the things that I can do to create this? I could ask it to um, give me exercises that I could do for engagement. I could tell it, this is my audience. These are the personality styles that are going to be in this workshop. Can you sort of restructure this or structure it based on this type of audience? And it will switch it. It will sort of change it up based on that. So refining questions, right? I want to come back to this one, right? So again, I mentioned in the PowerPoint, right? So from now on, when I ask a question, suggest a better version of the question and ask if I want to use it. So what does it say? Certainly, I can help refine your questions to get better or more specific answers. So now what I did was a very general question, right? How do I get in better shape? So this says to refine your question, we've tailored it a little bit, right? What are effective strategies for improving physical fitness? Do you want to use that one? So I said yes. So great. Here's what comes next, right? So and here's where again I sort of take this and say, okay, I'm going to combine a couple of these. I'm now going to not only ask it to maybe act as an expert in this area, I'm going to ask it to interview me, right? So think about this from a standpoint of a personal trainer, right? Can you ask me questions one at, and you notice, right? At a T, it knows what this question is going to be. It sort of, based on all of its data, it can almost predict what my next word would have been. So absolutely. Let's start with the first detail. What's your current age? 35. That was a while ago. Great. Thank you. Next question. What's your current fitness level? So if I were to write in, regularly active. Now, what I love about this, if you think, right, these were things that I had done later on. It's not as though this forgot about them. So when I go back to it, it's as though we're just continuing our conversation. Chat and we're just chatting. We're going to finish where we left off. It remembers everything that we talked about. And we're having these conversations. We're picking up right where we left off. Excellent. Thanks for the information. Do you have any time constraints? Yeah, right. Or whatever that is. So that again gives me the opportunity um, to just delve into how I can be more effective with this. So I'm going to jump back over. Let's see if I actually am able to do this here. I'm going to bring us back over to the PowerPoint because what I want to do is, again, I want us to have an opportunity to really discuss how do we use this, right? Or to recap this. So I'll jump back in here, launch my screen. And our last slide, right? Many different platforms, right? The questioning and refining the question. That is probably the biggest thing that you can have as a takeaway here is that this is all about the prompt. The better you are at asking the questions, the better the results that you're gonna get back. And I would highly recommend. There's a course that I just completed. That, believe it or not, I've been doing this for a long time. I found a lot of value to it in terms of the structure of it. and it was on Coursera. And it was by Vanderbilt University is the one that runs the class, and it's on generative prompts, how to create better prompts. But there are so many resources out there. So many people have classes that they're worthwhile. Any cheat sheets, any things that you get like that, they're just worth holding on to, right? Number of areas. There are so many different areas, and we've only touched on a few in terms of how I become better as a leader. Anything that I've read in a book, I can go back and research it and ask chat to um, align what my thoughts are or what my challenge is with how would I use this based on what I read in this book. Now, for some of these things, I might have to cut and paste that to give it the information it needs to be able to make those decisions, but I have that ability to just cut and paste it and do that. So with that said, Andrea, I'm glad you love the interviewing part. It is to me, it's one of those powerful ways where it just allows the expert to ask you what you need help in. We can use it in a number of different areas. I hope you found this helpful. There's so many options here. Again, be on the lookout. I am planning on doing more. If there are any specific challenges or things that you're facing in terms of how you use this or want to use it as it relates to leadership, send me a message on that. Email me. Ask questions. I'll go deeper in terms of how I'm using it with my clients. I will tell you, this is a tool that has just made things so much more incredible for me. So I appreciate your time, and again, hope you found this valuable. And wishing you all the best. Have a great day, and go out there and rise above